Hello my friends, in front of me I have a computer containing the clips from the recent Swedish Championship which I participated in, and we're going to look through the qualifiers, the semifinals and the finals round and talk a little bit about what I learned. I've done this a couple of times in the past where I've kind of dissected either mock competitions or World Cups or the Swedish Championships. Just talked about it for a little while, like kind of a cathartic process for me going through each of the rounds and looking through what went well and what didn't go so well. So we'll break down the technical aspects of this competition, what I did well there and what I didn't do so well, and also take a look at the mental aspects, what I performed better at than I have in the past. Starting off with the qualifiers, the footage isn't quite as nice as for the rest of the video, so we'll kind of just run through it. I had a very good qualifying round where the first two boulders that you can see in front of you are the first attempts that I made on these problems, and they are going pretty well. Second one was topped quite easily, and the first one I'm not struggling too much on, and I also flashed that problem. There's not so much to point out technically on these boulders, like I'm moving the way I should, I'm utilizing my hips, I'm trying to be in control in all of the movements. This is number 3 and 4 in front of you right now, where I climbed well, so I'll mention it already. I flashed 4 out of 5 boulders. The reason why is because they were set at a level that was quite below my limits, and I went at it with the attitude of like, just climb in control. Like, don't try too hard, don't try too little, just be sure to keep everything safe. And I could read that from the ground quite clearly, that these weren't going to be the biggest challenges for me. Oftentimes at competitions, I find that to be quite a tricky aspect, how to like not overshoot, like not go too hard so that you're kind of slipping off a foothold or like pulling unnecessarily hard in one position that doesn't leave you with enough energy to move into the next one. So there wasn't really that much to dissect from the qualifiers. I just wanted to run through them and then move over to the semifinals, where the first boulder was quite intimidating, as it was a big sideways jump in the beginning that it's one of those moves that if you go with the wrong momentum, you just don't do anything basically. And after the first move, you had to jump into this crack that was kind of hard to see. I used my height to my advantage and went really slowly on this jump, which resulted in me sticking it on the first go and making it to the top with a flash. So when I got to the second one, I was fresh and I was not stressed at all, which is good because this is one of those boulders that suits me the least you could possibly imagine. I am terrible at pressing. I am good at pulling between holes far apart that are preferably quite good, but pressing is my absolute nemesis. And I was quite okay. I didn't spend so many attempts on this boulder because of it. I only spent the amount of energy I felt was necessary to know if it was like an easy press boulder so that I could actually progress in it. And I didn't really waste any energy. I just went through it and like focused on the coming boulders that I know I would have had more potential in, at least probably. And well, this is where it kind of takes a little bit of a turn, because in the corner of my eye, I could see that it was a powerful boulder up next. I couldn't see the style on it, obviously, or I mean, I guess I could, but I didn't look. And so I was like, okay, well, next one I'll deliver on because it's a power problem. However, sometimes in competitions, it's not quite that simple. The problem that came up was incredibly crimpy on these like flat hold 6mm edges, which I don't really have the finger strength for, nor do I have the skin for them. I have really sweaty skin, which makes it incredibly hard because they just dig in deeply on my fingers. So on the first go, I did surprisingly okay, but I realized like, oh, I won't have many attempts at this boulder in 4 minutes, so I gotta make them count. I got up to it for a second round after a bit of rest, and I moved quite well, but really shakily, and then I panicked on this jump a little bit. The volume you can see there, you kind of have to hit on the right-hand side instead of on the left-hand side like I did. On the right-hand side, it's like a farm jug, but on the left-hand side, you're left with just this slopey, weird hold, which leaves you with having to pull so much more on the left hand than on the right. And I realized this right as I fell off, and I was like, dang, okay, I might have wasted this one, because I was kind of shaking on these holds just before it. Anyhow, I rested up and decided to try something else because I didn't think I'd had enough energy for one more proper attempt this way. So I tried to break the boulder using my height and climbing in more of a compression-y style. but it didn't work, unfortunately. And so I only had one more attempt left in the tank and the time, and I decided to give it my all on the original beta, crossing the left hand into the zone hold and going as the route setters clearly intended. The last boulder that remained was a slab, so I figured I'd need the powerful boulder because a slab can be quite random for me at times. Sometimes I'm quite good at them, and then sometimes I'm terrible, like absolutely terrible at slabs. So they're always a bit of a wild card in competition for me. And this time around, it turned out to be a very, very difficult slab. It saw one top in the entire competition. And well, we'll see if it was for me or not, but it was definitely one that was quite my style, I would say. I saw right away it's dynamic and then smearing on boxes, which is something that I'm a little bit better at than kind of like small edge walking on tiny feet. What I did here that I think I did quite well was I evaluated a lot of different positions instead of just stressing through something. But the problem was that I didn't actually commit to anything properly on the first attempt. So I decided to switch things up and moved my entire body weight higher up in this like kind of wide feet position that you can see right here, which allowed me to give a little bit more control over on the left hand side, but it was still hard to move my weight over on the left. And what happened was that I kind of couldn't figure out where to grab all of these holds, because you can kind of grab the edge there on the right, you can grab the top of the volumes, you can grab a little bit of everything. And that makes it quite hard, because then you're left with making no decision at all, which is equally as bad as forcing yourself into one beta. Oftentimes in competitions, it's really important to stick to, to figure out something that you're gonna try and then really commit to that. So you're not giving yourself 10 different options to move around with. Of course, if there's something where you have a lot of control, as on a slab, it can be beneficial to switch around. But generally, for me, in my experience, just committing to one thing is the best thing. That's where I perform the best, even if it's trash. And then I fall off and I learn something and adjust it for the next attempt. But regardless, I made it to finals, and we're gonna have a look at how that round went right now. Generally, the finals round is my favorite because we get to look at all the boulders together. But this first one that came up was this kind of campus paddle dyno, you could call it. And we all kind of read it as oh, you have to go dynamically throughout everything. You have to just paddle your way to the zone hold that's far on the right. So when I hopped on it, I was like, oh, I have a lot more control. You can kind of go slowly on these holds. So I had to change my plan right off the bat, which kind of puts me in this I don't know, it becomes a bit weird to climb then, because you're like, wait, how am I supposed to commit? How do I go? Do I go slowly? And that kind of messed up the top for me, because I wasn't so in control here. I just went for something and it didn't work for that attempt. But I knew that I had the capacity to hold it, and I figured out that for the last hold, I wanted to stop by smacking the box with the right arm and then catching the left top hold, because it was a lot better than I expected. So I hop on the boulder again, and this time I'm committed to making my beta work, because I know I won't have many attempts on this type of campusy sequence, but I mess it up and miss the jug, the zone hold, and I get kind of panicky. However, luckily I had a good friend of mine, Anton, who was the brush boy, so I just decided to relax. He was giving me some love, brushing the holds, and then psyching myself up, resting for about a minute here before the final attempt. But the big thing here is, if we look at the left foot, I move it a lot further out on the foothold, which gives me so much more hip mobility usage. I'm able to engage my hip twice, 3 times as much as before. So what that does is I'm able to move my hips way further over on the left, because I'm not quite as locked in against the wall. And then I'm able to generate much more momentum higher up, which gives me more time to control the swing at the top. And that's what I did to be able to finish up the boulder. And the good thing was I didn't lose my, mind after the first attempt. I wasn't like, oh shit, I should have done it. It was like, okay, I learned something. So let's use this knowledge to progress on the boulder in the next attempt. And that's something that I've picked up on a lot in the past year of competition, climbing that I've done. Just that a failed attempt is only failed if you didn't learn anything from it. So what I try and always apply is some sort of knowledge from every single attempt, even when I climb outdoors. So yeah, that's first boulder went well and I sent it. So let's move over to the second one. This one is just fucked. Like, it's properly messed up. None of us could read it in the when we got to view it at first. It was like either face out, face in, spin around this weird box, and the holes are really far apart here. I'm quite big, so it looks less than it is, but this was like, I wasn't even sure a lot of like all the athletes would reach between the holes, but they did. I'll say that already, but it was so confusing, and I decided to do this weird face out sequence here. Around this point is when I realized I was properly, screwed. This wasn't really gonna work. I have no idea what I was thinking in order to move out of this position. I was trying to swing dyno to that hold, and it was nowhere near like possible to work it. So I rested up and gave it a second attempt with a more face-in beta, which after about 1 second on the wall was like, oh, this is so apparent that this is the way to go. It was quite funny actually, because when I read this face-in sequence, like when we talked about that in isolation, it seemed absurd. But then it was such an apparent version of it when you were on it. The first attempt at that didn't really work because I hadn't read where the hold around the corner was. So I hopped on for a second attempt, but going much more slowly and controlled to the hold around the corner, because that's kind of a jug, and I could finally stick the zone hold. However, I don't know why, but my entire body got so incredibly pumped from pressing on that right hand. So my left hand was completely out of energy for, like, I can't really explain it physiologically, but I was the most pumped I've ever been on a boulder here, and my muscles just stopped working. But they were like jugs, these holds. They were so freaking good. I could probably hang here for like 5 minutes if you asked me to, but I couldn't move because my body was just so fatigued. So I ended up going for the penultimate hold, but just not having it in the tank to finish up the problem, which was quite unfortunate. I was still psyched that I got the zone, because that one was important for me. But moving into the third boulder, I'd lost a little bit of confidence. But this one was, however, one that I was incredibly psyched for. You had to move around this dual textured foothold, and we all read it as like a pirouette type thing, but we also read that that wouldn't be the easiest version around it. But I was kind of psyched for it because it's one of the most cool moves that I'd seen in a competition in a long time. So I was like, oh, you know what, I'll just commit to the pirouette. We read it as you would lean down on the right and press against the volume and catch the left hand, which is out there on the right, the zone hold. But I decided to commit to the pirouettes, and it was quite cool, because even on the first attempt at doing it, I would say that I was really freaking close. I missed the foothold a little bit, the left volume, the dual texture one, so I had to give it some attempts. But then on the third go, I kind of figured out something about the positioning, how to stay a little bit closer to the wall. And so I hopped on it, and you won't be able to see it on the right side right now because it's only on the left where it's visible. But I stick the zone hold and end up in this really cool, kind of Tom Hanks Mission Impossible type position, I guess, but with your feet, face out, facing the crowd. Yeah, it was just kind of a really cool move, and I got psyched to climb on the top section. But I wasn't really confident. I was not trusting my feet in the slightest, and you can see quite clearly what happens in my body position there is that I'm more like in a banana type way, like my butt is far on the left. I'm not committing to standing on the right hold. I'm standing on this dual textured foothold and trying to keep low. But on these type of slabs, it's so important to apply a lot of pressure on the feet and trust that they're gonna stick on the wall. And I just didn't do that enough, which resulted in me falling off. Unfortunately, as I hopped on the boulder again, I don't know why I'm so stubborn, but I decided to keep on doing this pirouette beta, even though it did definitely take some time and wasn't obviously super successful. I just knew that it worked, and so I wanted to commit to it. But unfortunately, I didn't manage to do the pirouette again. And in retrospect, it would have been a great idea to switch to the other method that we discussed in the viewing, because I'm pretty sure that that's just quite a lot easier and more high percentage. But I was just so psyched. Like, it was pretty obvious that the route setters wanted the spin, and I wanted to do it as well. So I don't really regret it, but I guess from a competition perspective, it wasn't ideal to keep on like punching it with that method. But we had one more boulder on the list that I was super psyched for, because it was this powerful climb where you would jump to this pinch, and kind of move your way powerfully out around the arête on the left. So the only thing that kind of bugged me with this is that the start of this was actually, it was really quite easy for a finals boulder, and the end of the boulder was the crux, where you had to do this pressing again. Luckily, I managed to work my way around it anyways, even though I kind of suck at this pressing position by moving my feet higher up and then going into an undercling, and ended up flashing the boulder. But it definitely wasn't quite as hard as I hoped it to be, because this was like my boulder. This is where I can shine. The other ones weren't really my strong suits, and unfortunately this one they had accidentally turned down a little bit too much. It was a little bit too easy for the competitors, so it saw 5 out of 6 flashes. But you know, that's competitions for you. You're served with the boulders that you're served, and you just have to deliver as much as possible. So I ended up 4th in the competition, and I just want to give a big shout out to homie Fredrik Selakius, who is now the reigning champion in combined bouldering and lead. We can take a look at when he tops the 3rd one, because I have footage of that actually from the camera. Because I thought he had like such an elegant style on this boulder. The way he climbed it is just, I mean, it's a press boulder, it's quite weird and physical, but I would say that regardless, he just, okay, we don't have to talk about this section right here, but the upper section is really quite interesting how he moves, because he climbs it really nicely for somebody who's probably, I would guess that he's probably as tired as I was up here, but he just climbs so much better that he makes it through this like last section here. He saves energy by not doing too aggressive moves, and then he locks his body in here to move up to the penultimate pinch. And I think if I did this, maybe I would have had a shot at completing the climb. And I think that's a good lesson for me, that I didn't do the perfect beta on this climb. And he like figured that out on the spot, how to move there in the most efficient way. And I found that quite interesting to reflect upon for myself, because I was so cocky up there. I was like, oh, this is going to be such an easy section. It's just moving between really good holds, so I don't have to think so much. And that arrogance definitely was my downfall on this boulder. But yeah, again, congratulations to Fredrik. And just to finish off, I also participated in the Nordic Championships 2 weeks later, so a couple of days ago, where I unironically made 4th place again. I just have some footage that we can look through right here from the rounds. So the qualifying rounds are on the left, and then one of the finals boulders is on the right. And this is actually, okay, so I guess I should explain why that's kind of funny. I place 4th in almost all of the competitions on a national level that I do. It's actually a bit absurd. I think I have more 4th placements than, you know, any other placement combined. So the majority of my of the place that of where I place in competitions is 4th. I like never make it on the podium. I made it on the podium once or twice, I think, at a national, well, a couple of times, which I think is quite hilarious. I'm just having fun every single comp nowadays, like really enjoying myself a lot. For me, I would have loved to know that a lot earlier in my climbing career, that just having fun is such an important aspect. So I hope maybe some of you out there are doing competitions and can learn something from that. Like, if there's one takeaway, try to always enjoy yourself, because that's when you're gonna be improving the most and learning the most. And yeah, that's the end of this video. Peace out, my homies.